Consciousness is a process by which being itself, that is understanding, grows reflective layers on itself. And this is the existential process of reality. You see, consciousness is an actual thing. It's developing. You can relate to it in very complex ways in terms of how it relates to your present moment and to the situation you find yourself in. But the heart of what happened in human development was that consciousness, as just pure unreflective being, in a sense mysterious, because reflective being can never totally verify that those states actually existed fully in and of themselves. But what happened was, with the development of language in particular, consciousness developed what was literally a kind of reflective layer, because suddenly meaning could be attached in different ways to things, so that objects could be associated with sounds, and people could be associated with names. And this whole process of association that occurred just by the process of this meaning association was in fact the first developmental layer of what we call self-consciousness. Because what immediately emerges in this associative process right away is this strange concept of I. The I. The I. The one. And it emerges in consciousness as a self-reflective layer of the thing. And then what happens is, finally, after a long developmental process, and a teleological process that is inevitable once consciousness gets going, what happens is consciousness starts to actually try to integrate itself into its own explanations of itself in the most rigorous way possible, that is, with consciousness science. But meanwhile, all through the past, what has been developing and emerging in very clear form is also a radical archetypal process to reality, what we can call a spiritual process, a religious process, but one that ultimately generates the ultimate concept of the I, the ultimate superego, God, who emerges once self-reflection emerges as being real, which is one of the weirdest things about God, because one of the things you can then know is that God is not a being in the world or any world, but being itself. So consciousness has had some very sophisticated explanations of the grand order of things, but always maintaining the first self-reflective layer. But now with the integration of consciousness into its explanations of science, that is to say, the causal efficacy order of the world, it starts to once again see these big concepts as integrated in an interesting way, but this time it can't just stop there. A new layer of self-consciousness is actually emerging, literally a reflective layer of self-consciousness. Because consciousness is starting to want to relate to itself in a different way, and this is all being made clear because it's wanting to break out and open up into its own self-expression through its understanding of itself. And you see this with technology. This is what the internet is. The internet is just all coming together with us wanting to see it all and put all the data in one place and start to make models upon models upon models of the world in every domain. And it kind of explodes into self-understanding. Meanwhile, in consciousness science, it's explaining it all in a radically more serious way. And then what horribly starts to emerge is the truth, which is that the whole thing is some grand, crazy, archetypal, teleological process which works on many, many meaning scales. And when this hysteria happens and the realization that this is what is happening is occurring, and it's actually tangible in people's immediate consciousness, there's going to want to be a kind of concept focus And the amazing thing is that the more people start to think about God, the more radically, perfectly teleological he was all along. And therefore, the ultimate concept has been placed into reality as reality itself in the person of Jesus Christ. And that this was the conceptual structure all along to ground this developmental process of consciousness, at least in this reality, to ground this developmental process in a perfect totality symbol, which allows consciousness, especially when it hits the wall and starts to break through to the next layer of self-consciousness, has the proper image to refer back to in order to totally liberate itself, because only the radical revelation of self-forgiveness of Christ releases one's own guilt about oneself, and which is what consciousness needs, because what really is breaking through into the next layer of self-consciousness is more and more layers of emotion. And because that's what actually runs the show, is the emotional machinery. And the emotion of love is what needs to come through, just as a structural reality for consciousness to deal with itself in this transition. And only Jesus Christ embodies the proper concept that both reveals that reality is love and is an object of love that the consciousness can refer to when it needs to really focus on a concept as it breaks out. This is what's going on. The whole thing has been a perfect, as if orchestrated by the perfect architect figure from the Matrix, but a good guy. You know? That's what it's like. That's what teleology is. It's the understanding of this in consciousness, and everyone's looking around going, where's it going to be? Where's the end going to come from? Where is the transcendental object at the end of time that Terence McKenna talked about? God, the omega point. Where is it? When's it going to come? It's in consciousness. That is to say, it is in understanding. It is in the process of understanding properly. And it's not going to happen that, like Neo, you stand up and suddenly you see the zeros and ones. That is a metaphorical representation of Neo standing up and just seeing the Matrix as it was, but with a new layer of understanding that recontextualizes its very essence to you. And that the truth that it is grounded in the brain of Jesus Christ is actually a very good conceptual center for reality. The best possible conceptual center for reality. That's why it's self-revealing to be true in an almost hysterical way. Consciousness is growing a new layer, but the implications for that in being are outrageous and almost unthinkable. So it has to be grounded in love, who is Jesus Christ.